Welcome along to my rankings from the 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix weekend. In this series, we go through all 20 drivers from the Brazilian Grand Prix and rank them out of 10 as of how they performed during the weekend. If you want to see more of this series, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Let's do this. It's like we always do, we're going to start from last to first, with this case, DNF to first. The home hero, Gabriel Bortoleto, he really struggled this weekend, but not because of his pace. I think his pace was quite decent, but he crashed twice. One of them was his fault. One of them wasn't really his fault. But overall, just wasn't really a good weekend. Was lacking pace behind his teammate. Still had solid pace and crashed 2 times. So I'm going to give Gabriel Bortoleto a 2 out of 10. Maybe this is a bit harsh, but if you crash twice, you don't deserve any higher than a 2 in my opinion. Moving on to Lewis Hamilton, the second driver in this video, who had a bit of an underwhelming weekend. He's been on a good run of form as of late, been matching his teammate, beating his teammate at certain occasions, but this weekend was just off the pace, just complaining about his car being really hard to drive, which I do believe him, that for some reason that Ferrari, especially in the hands of Hamilton, was very undrivable for some reason, and I think Leclerc did the maximum he could in that Ferrari, but not a good weekend for Lewis Hamilton, so I have to give him a 3 out of 10. It wasn't a good weekend from the Brit. Moving on to Charles Leclerc, who, apart from the DNF, which was not his fault whatsoever, I think he had a really good weekend. Did Charles Leclerc. Got good qualifying in P3. Could have been P2, but I think that's the best he could have done, P3. And in the race, he DNF'd, but that was not his fault whatsoever. So I'm going to give Charles Leclerc an 8.5 out of 10. I don't think there was much more he could have really done. If he finished the race, he probably would have gotten a bit higher. Moving on to Yuki Tsunoda, who had a bit of an underwhelming weekend as well. I know the second Red Bull seat has been pretty hard this season, but he was only 3 tenths off in qualifying off Verstappen. Did technically get a 20-second penalty because he didn't serve the 10-second penalty properly in the pits, but he did deserve the 10-second penalty, and he did deserve another 10-second penalty because they forgot to serve the other penalty. So we don't know where Snow would have finished. I think he could have gotten some points, maybe, but underwhelming once again from the second Red Bull seat, aka Tsunoda. So I'm going to have to give Tsunoda a 3 out of 10. Not a good weekend for Yuki Tsunoda. Hopefully he can bounce back at Las Vegas. Moving on to Lance Stroll, who had a bit of an underrated weekend in my opinion. The sprint part of the weekend wasn't too bad. The normal part wasn't too bad either. Was sort of matching his teammate, to be fair, in terms of pace. So I'm going to give Lance Stroll a 5 out of 10. Just an average weekend from the Canadian. Moving on to Franco Colapinto, and I think he had a really bad weekend, to be honest with you. He was very far off his teammate in terms of quali pace and race pace. Normally Colapinto as a driver that's quite good on race pace, but this weekend wasn't quite there for some reason. Yeah, not a good weekend. So I'm going to give him a 3.5 out of 10. I could have gave him lower, could have gave him higher, maybe, but I think a 3.5 is fair. Moving on to Fernando Alonso, who had a good weekend considering the Aston Martin wasn't particularly fast throughout the weekend. Did the best he could in the sprint quali and the sprint race. Normal quali and a normal race. Maybe could have done better, but I think, to be honest with you, I just think the Aston wasn't that competitive overall. So I'm going to give Alonso a 6 out of 10, a bit higher than his teammate. Moving on to Carlos Sainz, who I don't know if the Williams was just not good this weekend or if the drivers under-delivered, but Sainz definitely did under-deliver a bit this weekend. He's been on a good run of form, a bit like Hamilton this weekend, but for some reason it just didn't click for Sainz and also Williams. We'll talk about his teammate in just a moment. Bad weekend, like I said, for Sainz. Going to give him a 6 out of 10. Could have been a lot better, could have been a lot worse, but I think the reason why I gave him a 6 is I don't think the car was that good, but still could have done a lot better. Moving on to Esteban Ocon, who apparently had a bit of bad luck in the race, and he did stuff in the pit lane. But he was a bit far off his teammate's pace once again. I think considering his teammate finished 6th, he could have got a few more positions, but we all let him off because I don't know what happened particularly to him in the race. I don't know if he had a problem in the pit stop or had a bad strategy. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to give Ocon a 5.5 out of 10. Moving on to Alex Albon, who, considering the Williams didn't look the greatest this weekend, I think he done okay, to be honest with you. I think he did an okay job of maximising points, or to be fair, he didn't score any points, but maximising the result, I should say, for the team. So I'm going to give Albon a 7.5 out of 10. This is probably a bit too high, to be fair, now that I think about it, for Alex Albon, but I think a 7.5 is just about right. He did get a bit unlucky in the race as well with the strategy. Moving on to Pierre Gasly, who had a very underrated weekend. In that pink tractor of an Alpine, he did very, very well, in my opinion. Did very, very well to get into Q3, get a point, or get 2 points this weekend. Really good job, once again, from Pierre Gasly. Just deserves a better car. Deserves a better car. So I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. Just dragged the car to places where it shouldn't have been this weekend. Moving on to Nico Hulkenberg. Another good weekend from the German. I think no one's really talking about him for some weird reason. I don't know why. No one's been talking about it that much this weekend. Outclassed his teammate once again. Got some points for the Sauber team in their fight in the midfield. I'm going to give Hulkenberg an 8 out of 10 this weekend. Another solid weekend from him. Moving on to Isaac Hadjar. Another good weekend from Hadjar. This man's just so good. He's so consistent. Always does the best he can. I know sometimes makes too many mistakes, but to be honest, everyone makes mistakes. Especially this year. Everyone's made mistakes this year. Hadjar, this weekend, I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. A solid weekend once again from the Frenchman. Moving on to Liam Lawson, and even though he had a fantastic result, I think he was a bit behind his teammate. Not by much, but just a little bit behind his teammate in terms of pure pace. But obviously, probably made the right strategy call and got him where he deserved to be, P7. Defended brilliantly from Hadjar and Hulkenberg at the end of the Grand Prix. So I'm going to give Liam Lawson an 8 out of 10 as well. A good weekend from Racing Bulls. Moving on to Ollie Bearman. Another great weekend from the Brit, who's, in my opinion, going to be a future star of Formula 1. Just so good. I can see him at Ferrari in a couple of years, maybe in 2027, maybe 2028, maybe. Not 100% sure, but another great weekend from Ollie Bearman. So I'm going to give him a 9.5 out of 10. Another good weekend from him. Moving on to Oscar Piastri. I feel like this one's a tough one to rank because even though he didn't have great pace, he was still really robbed of a second place in the main Grand Prix. Maybe even the win if he did a different strategy. But yeah, I don't think he should have got a penalty. I think he should have gone P2 without the penalty. Yeah, not much really to say. Gonna give him a 7 out of 10. Did kind of get robbed. If he got P2, I probably would have gave him a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. But since you got a penalty, which I don't agree with, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Next up, George Russell, who, once again, just a solid weekend. I know he got beat by Antonelli this weekend, but I still think he did very well. Made a gamble in qualifying, which didn't pay off, but everyone makes gambles. Sometimes they work, sometimes they doesn't. It is what it is. I felt like his race pace was really good, though, this weekend. I think he had better race pace than Kimi, but I think he had some brake problems. But yeah, it is what it is. Still a solid weekend from Mr. Russell. Going to give him a 7.5 out of 10, and that's probably one of the worst rankings he's had this season, and it's still a 7.5 out of 10. Just outrageous. Moving on to Max Verstappen. Another good weekend from him. Could have done maybe a bit better in sprint quali, but 6th was probably really thinking about it, the best he could have done. But yeah, good weekend. Start from the pit lane, got 3rd. Brilliant drive in the race. So I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. This could have been a 10, but I feel like he definitely should have done a bit better in qualifying. And if he'd done better in qualifying, he probably wouldn't have changed his setups. Maybe it was a good thing he went out in Q1, but I think a 9 out of 10 is fair. Probably could have gave him a 10 out of 10. Moving on to Kimi Antonelli. A brilliant weekend. By far his best weekend. Moving on to Kimi Antonelli, by far his best weekend in Formula 1 by a mile. Maximised every session, had great pace, maybe not a good race pace compared to his teammate, but still, brilliant weekend from the Italian. This is why he will be a future, I'm not going to say future GOAT, but a future champion in Formula 1 alongside Behrman, maybe alongside Bortoletto. So I'm going to give him a 10 out of 10. It was a good weekend, flawless weekend overall from Kimi Antonelli. And last but not least, we have Lando Norris. There's not much really to say. Another flawless weekend from Lando Norris. He's really, really impressing me. I know I predicted him a couple weeks ago to win the championship, but his last 3 or 4 races or so have been really, really impressive. And yeah, he's just taken another step to his first championship. He's got, in my opinion, one hand on the championship trophy. But you know what they say? You can't claim with one hand, you need both hands on the championship trophy. But for this weekend, I'm going to give him a 10 out of 10. A flawless weekend. A bit like Antonelli from Lando Norris. But there we have it. That's the end of my rankings. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'm hoping to slow down this a little bit. I was sort of rushing a little bit to get this out, but hopefully the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend, we shouldn't have to be rushing anything dramatically. But these are going to be unedited. As you can probably tell, most of them are going to be unedited, and most parts of the video are going to be unedited. That's why there's going to be a lot of bad parts in the video, but I hope you guys understand. But thanks for watching. I'll see you guys for a new video coming soon.